Melinda Gates stood next to one of the world's wealthiest men for 27 years. She managed their foundation, raised 3 kids, and grinned in pictures. However, she abandoned everything in 2021. Everyone was taken aback by the divorce. The value of the settlement was $76 billion. Bill's errors were discussed in whispers, but Melinda said nothing. Then at age 61 she finally spoke in 2025. She disclosed a 2013 encounter that left her feeling ill. She acknowledged the true reason she left and talked about the lies that kept coming up. Everything that people believed to be true was altered by what she said. Melinda, born in Dallas on August 15, 1964, Anne French grew up in a home where curiosity and discipline coexisted. Her father was an aerospace engineer who assisted in sending Americans to the moon during the Apollo era, and she was the second of 4 children. Her mother stayed at home and established warm, consistent rituals, values, and expectations that defined the family's rhythm. Her father understood that having 4 children required preparation, and their neighborhood was cozy but never ostentatious. To ensure that each of them could attend college, he established a rental property company in the late 1970s. By the time Melinda was 10, this had become a family endeavor, and she was holding a paintbrush. Painting walls, cleaning floors, and learning minor repairs were all part of the weekend routine. She soon realized that sharing the load made responsibility feel less heavy, and that lesson really stuck with me. The tasks expanded along with the business. By the age of 12, she was performing basic bookkeeping and balancing numbers that were unfamiliar to most children her age. She grew accustomed to the notion of working for something greater than herself. She helped clean each apartment, which resulted in tuition savings later. Every document she oversaw demonstrated to her how meticulous preparation produced opportunity. Her sense of discipline was formed throughout those formative years without any lectures. Long before she knew what independence was, she understood it. And as she entered her early teens, that foundation continued to grow. Something unexpected entered the house at that same moment. She was unaware of the possibilities until her father brought home an Apple II computer, which was introduced in 1977. The slow blinking cursor drew her in when she started using it at the age of 14 to monitor rental records. She repeatedly typed commands until basic programs replied to her thoughts as she taught herself the fundamentals. Even though very few girls were familiar with coding at the time, she found it reassuring. Neither gender nor age mattered to the machine. It was just interested in logic. She cherished that. She spent hours writing short scripts that addressed minor issues in the rental industry. She began to see the potential of technology to help her understand the world, and she carried that emotion with her. When she enrolled in Ursuline Academy in 1978, her curiosity only increased. Every student at the institution had challenges, and Melinda enjoyed the pressure. She put a lot of effort into all of her subjects, but particularly into science and math, and her sincerity was observed by the teachers. Her destiny was altered when Ursuline became one of the first Texas schools to incorporate computer use in the classroom. Classes in computer science were both thrilling and scary to her, and each assignment helped her delve further into the area she was already passionate about. Along with her stellar academics and unwavering belief that technology may influence the future, she graduated as valedictorian in 1982. Something became evident throughout her stay there. She desired to contribute to that future. Shortly after, she accepted her first paid position as a math and programming tutor for younger. Few girls were teaching anyone to code in the early 1980s. But for $5 an hour, she stood in front of struggling kids and explained fundamental code lines. For a teenager, the money was decent, but more significantly, she discovered how much she loved assisting people in comprehending challenging concepts. She observed how teaching improved her own thinking, and the self-assurance she acquired throughout those sessions persisted. She carried those early teachings with her to Duke University in 1982. When she entered computer science classes, where she was sometimes the sole female student, the atmosphere changed. She sensed the change immediately as male pupils yelled their answers without hesitation. Although she had had a positive and well-rounded high school experience, this setting occasionally felt overpowering. She had never seen a programming language used by the professor in one of her first computer science classes. She began to mistrust herself at that time. But the uncertainty was short-lived. She persisted. She put more effort into her studies. She picked things up more quickly. She earned her bachelor's degree in computer science and economics in 1986. She was only 23 when she earned her MBA in 1987. With perseverance, she made her way through those years. Later holding the position of trustee on the Duke board from 1996 to 2003. She learned how to compete, adjust, and have faith in her own judgment throughout those 5 years at Duke. Her route was further reinforced by her internships. She worked at IBM for 2 summers where she learned how big teams operated and how software was assembled piece by piece. Despite the rigorous nature of the work, she took in as much as she could. During a period when women were uncommon in such positions, these internships provided her with practical technical experience. She gained knowledge of coding techniques, multimedia technologies, and the value of teamwork. She found herself dreaming about the future of this technological society while spending those summers living on the cheap in dorms. She became sharper, more self-assured, and more interested in the future she desired. Then a fork in the road appeared. She got a job offer during her second internship at IBM. It appeared to be the prudent decision. The business was enormous, the career path appeared to be secure. However, her hiring manager did something out of the ordinary at her last interview. The manager advised her to consider Microsoft, which was still a smaller business with lofty goals. She was taken aback and a little afraid by such counsel. It wasn't easy to start fresh in Seattle. Still, she paid attention. She desired development more than solace. She therefore rejected IBM and joined Microsoft in 1987. In retrospect, she claimed that the choice was what made all the difference. As a 23-year-old product manager with a recent MBA and a modest resolve to make a significant contribution, she joined Microsoft in August 1987. Multimedia products, which were still in their infancy, were the focus of her early work. Cinemania, a CD-ROM movie guide that debuted in 1992, was one of her first significant endeavors. In a way that most people had never seen before, it combined movies, trivia, cast information, and interactive elements. The initiative demonstrated that digital entertainment might be both useful and enjoyable, selling over 200,000 copies in its first year. She was able to establish herself within the organization because to her success. Shortly after, she was in charge of the group that founded Enarta in 1993. One of the most significant digital encyclopedias of its era was Enarta. It created a single product by combining text, images, music, and video. Additionally, it sold more than 1 million copies by 1995. It was used for homework by families. It was embraced by schools. It was transported by computers all around the world. And she oversaw every step of the process from design to content to user interaction. Enarta demonstrated to her the potential of skillfully applied technology. She oversaw products like Publisher, Bob, Money, Works, and Words multimedia components in addition to these initiatives. Every endeavor had its own set of difficulties. She found Microsoft Bob to be the most challenging. Bob used a virtual home interface in an attempt to make computers more user-friendly. However, the hardware was not prepared for it at the time. Due to its difficulties, the program was shut down. Nevertheless, she learned important lessons from the encounter. She was not diminished by failure. If anything, it strengthened her and increased her courage to take risks. She led teams of over 100 employees and spearheaded inventions that propelled Microsoft's multimedia success to almost 90% of the market by the early 1990s. When she was promoted to General Manager of Information Products. The corporation became a worldwide force thanks to her leadership. Her choices influenced software that is used in homes all around the world, and her fame gradually but surely increased. She contributed to the founding of Expedia in 1996, a project that revolutionized travel reservations. It was one of the fastest-growing digital travel firms of the time thanks to its user-friendly layout, online reservations, and real-time airline costs. It brought in $250 million in reservations by 1998. It employed over 400 people and generated over $590 million in revenue by 2002. Her leadership was crucial to the company's faster-than-expected growth. She also had to cope with the strain of Microsoft's antitrust lawsuits in the 1990s during these same years. Every department was under intense examination as the Department of Justice looked into the business for monopolistic behavior. While overcoming those obstacles, her team concentrated on user experience and product quality, and Microsoft maintained its position as the top software provider in spite of ongoing legal issues. There was a subtle personal development going on behind all the effort. She started dating Bill Gates in 1987, but due to workplace regulations they kept their relationship a secret. They developed an intellectual and personal relationship over the course of 3 years. They were married in a modest ceremony with just 20 guests on the Hawaiian island of Launa on January 1, 1994. She came into that marriage feeling very equal. She made sure she would be an equal partner by negotiating a robust prenuptial agreement. And the silent assurance that underpinned that decision demonstrated the same independence she had possessed since childhood. In 1987, Melinda French joined Microsoft as a young product manager who preferred problem-solving over attention. She began with tiny projects before swiftly progressing to larger ones like Word and Narda and Microsoft Bob. By 1994, she was in charge of a sizable team as General Manager of Information Products, overseeing over 1,700 employees and influencing the Microsoft consumer side that millions of households used at home. She wed Bill Gates during this time, who was already well known as the CEO of Microsoft. She did, however, retain her badge, her office, and her responsibility within the organization. According to those who worked with her, she only received promotions if the task was completed and the product sent, and no one gave a damn about her last name. She continued to manage teams and goods while her personal life changed, staying in that pressure cooker during her first pregnancy. She was 32 years old and at a turning point in her life by 1996. She had two options: she could continue to advance within one of the most cutthroat organizations on the planet, or she could leave and raise her kids. She decided to go. That choice ended a 9-year period during which she had contributed to the development of Microsoft's consumer culture and began a completely new one that would gradually draw her away from business and into philanthropy. She assisted in completing a final major project just before she left. As Expedia developed from an internal concept into a legitimate company in 1996, Melinda held a senior position. Melinda was one of the executives driving strategy, supporting the notion that consumers would eventually book their travels online, while Richard Barton oversaw the day-to-day team at Microsoft's Redmond office. Microsoft invested heavily in Expedia before spinning it out as a distinct public business in 1999 to allow it to operate independently, hire people with stock options, and advance more quickly. Years later, with $13.7 billion in revenue for 2024 and more than $110.9 billion in gross bookings, Expedia Group would have a market value of over $19.39 billion by 2025. Melinda's early investments enabled the travel website, which started out as a side project within Microsoft, to surpass competitors like Travel Velocity and grow into a global powerhouse. The atmosphere at Microsoft was never comfortable, despite her success. Later, Melinda characterized the culture as competitive, abrasive, and noisy, which frequently pushed women to the brink. She nearly quit there early in her career because the sessions seemed more like arguments than discussions. Nevertheless, she continued to advance due to her composed demeanor and technical proficiency. In what many employees perceived as a traditional male-dominated workplace, she gradually started discreetly coaching women, attracting talent, and exhibiting a softer, more collaborative style of leadership. She also seen firsthand how prominent men behaved in the workplace, such as Bill's early attention to certain female employees. She struggled for years to reconcile her principles with the society she lived in on a daily basis. Her stock options had made her extremely wealthy by the time she departed in 1996. Melinda had the resources to live her life as she pleased even before there was a formal foundation because Microsoft's stock price had skyrocketed. She started investing in a new kind of future rather than just increasing her own wealth. She and Bill transferred billions of dollars worth of Microsoft stock into the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation during the ensuing years. The foundation became the biggest philanthropic organization of its kind by the early 2000s after the couple had contributed almost $20 billion to it. By 2025, her personal wealth would still be in the tens of billions at about $17.4 billion. Now, however, the majority of her efforts were directed toward leveraging that money for purposes other than profit, particularly through the company she later founded, Pivotal Ventures, which catered to women and families. The tale of philanthropy did not begin in a single explosion. It expanded gradually. They established the William H. Gates Foundation in 1994, initially as a small family endeavor focused on education and health. The Gates Learning Foundation and the Gates Library Foundation came next. They combined all of these into one edifice in August 1999 and gave it both of their names. By the end of 1999, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation had amassed an endowment of over $17 billion, primarily in Microsoft stock. Bill contributed an additional $5 billion in January 2000, increasing the endowment to almost $22 billion. With that magnitude, the foundation was suddenly able to sponsor numerous projects rather than only restructure entire systems. Melinda was considering who would be excluded even before the majority of people came online. She and Microsoft supported an initiative known as Libraries Online in the mid-1990s. They provided over $17 million in software and support to 200 libraries between 1995 and 1997, enabling computers and internet connection in public areas where anybody could enter and learn. This work was overseen by Patty Stonecipher, who subsequently became the foundation's leader. Over 10,000 libraries in the U.S. have gotten assistance in some capacity by 2000. Those devices served as many retirees, students, and low-income families' first introduction to the digital world. And the Foundation's view that having access to technology as a form of fundamental infrastructure was shaped by that early push. The Foundation expanded its scope as the new century dawned. They provided more than $100 million in grants by 1999 alone, supporting educational reforms in the Pacific Northwest and funding scholarships for minority students. A $10 million scholarship program at the University of Washington in memory of Bill's mother Mary Gates was one significant donation. Compared to what would happen later, these figures were modest, but they revealed a trend. Because Melinda felt that education was a lever, the Foundation funded experiments, teacher training, and new teaching approaches to improve public schools for underprivileged pupils. Then she was transformed by Africa. Melinda observed things that statistics could not adequately explain when she traveled through hospitals and villages in Tanzania and Zambia in the late 1990s. Youngsters dying of diseases like malaria and other avoidable illnesses. For basic care, mothers walk for hours. She returned with the conviction that the core of their generosity needed to be global health. This experience encouraged the Foundation to support extensive family planning, maternal health initiatives, and immunization campaigns, particularly in areas with the greatest rates of child death. They had already invested hundreds of millions of dollars in these initiatives by 2000. Additionally, those choices would ultimately save millions of lives. The Foundation expanded into a sort of empire between 2000 and 2015. Beginning with the $5 billion contribution in 1999 and the further $16 million in 2000, there were more stock injections, particularly from Warren Buffett's $30 billion pledge in 2006. By 2015, the endowment had surpassed $50 billion. During that time, the Foundation invested roughly $53.8 billion toward global development, education, and health. Melinda Company oversaw collaborations with governments and other donors while serving as chair of 5 significant divisions. Their use of data, statistics, and a business-style approach raised the bar for transparency and growth in the philanthropic sector. The battle against polio is among the best illustrations of their influence. Between 2000 and 2015, the Foundation assisted in vaccinating over 100 million children in Pakistan, India, and other nations as part of the global polio eradication drive. Between 1994 and 2015, Pakistan's annual polio case count decreased by over 90%, including an 80% decrease in a single year from 306 cases in 2014 to 54 in 2015. In 2014, India declared that polio was eradicated. The Foundation invested hundreds of millions of dollars in monitoring vaccines and grassroots efforts to get immunizations into distant and conflict areas. That meant children who would never be paralyzed by an illness that had previously seemed insurmountable to many families. Additionally, Melinda made the stories focus on women's health. She supported almost $1 billion in contraception initiatives in Asia and Africa between 2009 and 2015. In Kenya, married women's use of contraceptives increased from roughly 46% in 2009 to roughly 58% by 2015, surpassing official expectations. The Foundation contributed to increasing access to contemporary techniques in underprivileged urban neighborhoods through the Urban Reproductive Health Initiative and related initiatives. An estimated 80 million fewer unwanted pregnancies and 111,000 fewer maternal deaths occurred throughout Africa as a result of this change, according to researchers. Melinda advocated for paid family leave and legislation that would allow women to continue working without compromising their health in the United States at the same time. Her efforts were not in vain. President Barack Obama awarded her and Bill the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2016, the nation's highest civilian award, in acknowledgement of the over $36 billion in awards they had received since 2000. She received the Legion of Honor from France at the same time for her contributions to global development and health. Although those medals were symbolic, they attested to something genuine. One of the most significant figures in contemporary charity was a lady who had once discreetly sent software from a cubicle. Melinda was constructing something unrelated to the Foundation at the same time. She founded Pivotal Ventures in 2015 with the goal of funding businesses and initiatives that will advance the status of women and girls. Pivotal backed initiatives in the fields of women in media and technology, mental health, caregiving, politics, and economic security. It has invested hundreds of millions of dollars in over 150 organizations by 2025, including startups like Papa, which links college students with elderly people in need of assistance, and several initiatives to change the way the economy views the labor that women do. Her compass was straightforward: the world would change more quickly if more women held more authority and control over resources. Her private life was growing increasingly complex as her public activities expanded. Michael Larson, Bill's longtime money manager, was accused of sexual harassment in 2017 by a woman who worked at a bike shop that was partially owned by a company connected to the Gates family. Melinda pushed for an outside investigation by a separate law firm after Bill first attempted to settle the issue amicably. The woman agreed to a non-disclosure agreement and a payment. Melinda, however, was not content. She insisted on getting a closer look at the corporate culture of Cascade Investments, the clandestine company that managed Bill's wealth. Although Larson denied any culpability, the incident made an already strained marriage even more tense. This signaled a change in Melinda's problem-solving style. She called for public accountability rather than ignoring them in silence. Bill was then the subject of an investigation by Microsoft's own board in 2019. While he was still chairman in 2000, a female engineer claimed to have had a long-term relationship with him. The board engaged outside attorneys, and Microsoft subsequently verified that Bill had pursued a connection with the worker. Bill claimed to have left the board in March 2020 to concentrate on charity, but some with knowledge of the matter claimed that the inquiry was a significant factor in his choice. The narrative, which surfaced at the height of the Me Too movement, undermined the public's perception of the meticulous, orderly engineer. Additionally, it intensified the emotional upheaval in Melinda's life, where reputation, marriage, and employment had always been closely related. Bill's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein was another source of suffering. Melinda went to Epstein's townhouse in New York with Bill in September 2013. They were given a public service award at the Pierre Hotel that same day. She then claimed to have felt ill after the visit. She regretted ever entering Epstein's home and called him the embodiment of evil. She felt enraged and made it plain to him that this relationship was a major sore spot when she found out that Bill had kept seeing Epstein after that. Later on, Bill would acknowledge that meeting Epstein was a grave error. However, by that point, his connection to a convicted sexual offender had already seriously damaged their marriage and caused Melinda a great deal of anxiety and rage. She made an effort to stay focused on her work despite everything that was going on. Her book Moment of Lift, which was published in April 2019, included anecdotes from her travels and a compelling argument for empowering women as the quickest path to uplifting families and communities. The book initially seemed to be a bold plea for equality. She was battling anxiety, nightmares, and a feeling that the life she had created around her husband was unstable behind the scenes. She was forced to face the amount of herself she had sacrificed to support Bill and the foundation, as well as traumatic recollections of being one of the few women in male-dominated environments, when writing the book. The pressure eventually became apparent during a trip to New Mexico later that year. According to friends, Melinda had what seemed like a bad dream while she was awake. A sort of breakdown that demonstrated the extent of the harm. She started having serious divorce negotiations after returning from New Mexico in late 2019. While attorneys and advisors worked in the background, she and Bill quietly parted ways. Even though it wouldn't be made public until May 2021, she knew the marriage was over then. The world was taken aback by the May 2021 public declaration. Bill and Melinda Gates announced that their marriage was irretrievably dissolved after 27 years of marriage and 3 children. After more details of Bill's contacts with Epstein came to light, it was later revealed that she had previously sought advice from divorce lawyers back in October 2019. The settlement would grow to be among the biggest in recorded history. Melinda is thought to have obtained assets valued at over $76 billion, making the divorce one of the most costly in history. The divorce was finalized in August 2021. Soon after, Melinda promised to utilize her riches and independence to further advance the causes she believed in by pledging $1 billion over 2 years for women's empowerment and health. Melinda started talking more candidly about the emotional toll of her marriage in interviews. She discussed Bill's betrayals, which included the affair with a Microsoft employee that led to the board probe, and how they caused nightmares and panic attacks. As she carried the responsibility of the foundation and stood next to one of the most powerful men in the world, she talked about losing her identity for almost 10 years. Through therapy, she was able to gradually re-establish her identity and react to the events without compromising her moral principles. Many women who saw their own stories on a smaller scale found resonance in her candor. According to her, Epstein continued to be the last straw for a lot of individuals. In subsequent interviews, Melinda reaffirmed that having him in their lives marked a sea change. She had forewarned Bill in advance, and she was alerted that they did not share the same boundaries or judgment when he persisted in seeing Epstein even after the financier's passing in 2019. She found it unacceptable that he was associated with a known abuser. Following the divorce, Melinda concentrated more on helping victims and pushing for accountability, while Bill openly referred to the relationship with Epstein as a significant error in judgment. Another break was formally announced in May 2024. Bill was the only chair of the Gates Foundation when Melinda resigned. She had contributed to the establishment and direction of the organization bearing both of their names for over 20 years. She was now leaving that shared platform to focus entirely on her personal journey. She stated that leaving the foundation will allow her to better align her time and resources with her personal goal, and committed to investing at least $1 billion over 2 years in programs that support women and girls. In addition to bringing attention to the fact that so few women had ever held such authority in international philanthropy, her resignation sparked concerns about the foundation's future. Melinda started giving brief tidbits of her new life after the divorce. She talked about feeling more at ease and being in a very happy relationship. She continued to return to the same main topics, supported new projects, and increased her investments through significant endeavors. Families, communities, and economies all gain when women hold positions of authority. Her narrative shifted from being the wife of a well-known founder to one about a lady who recovered from a private and public storm. Her projected net worth was close to $15.2 billion by the middle of the 2020s, indicating that her financial situation remained significant. A significant portion of that was dedicated to addressing significant issues that impact women and girls, either directly or indirectly. She had invested hundreds of millions in over 150 organizations through significant endeavors. These included businesses in the technology and financial sectors, media initiatives, and political campaigns to improve the representation of women and alter caregiving regulations. Additionally, her money appeared on the map in more precise locations. For instance, in December 2023, the Gates Foundation contributed to the financing of a concessional loan of €55 million in Pakistan, which included a €20 million principal purchase from the foundation to support state health institutions and the polio eradication effort in Pakistan. The funds improved illness tracking systems, hired and trained female health workers, and bolstered immunization campaigns. Additionally, it served as inspiration for regional initiatives that adopted her strategy of funding women-focused initiatives, such as fintech services for women seeking greater financial autonomy. Melinda's voice got even more intimate in 2025. In April of that year, her book The Next Day was published. She reflected on her time in college, her foray into the world of technology, her tenure at Microsoft, motherhood, the death of a close friend, and the protracted dissolution of her marriage. She stated unequivocally that the breakdown of honesty and trust was the reason for the divorce. She said that when dishonesty exists in a relationship, closeness is impossible. She wrote of having nightmares and panic attacks, as well as how therapy helped her learn how to react to betrayal without turning on herself. She also disclosed that the split occurred behind closed doors for over a year before anyone was aware of it. She addressed millions of viewers personally when she appeared on Stephen Colbert's Late Show around the same time. She stated in an interview from April 2025 that she had to end the marriage since there was insufficient honesty to maintain genuine trust. She acknowledged that she was currently in a really wonderful relationship and described how treatment had helped her maintain her integrity. As she spoke, viewers witnessed a lady who had been a part of one of the world's most prominent partnerships before leaving to define herself according to her own standards.